There we go. All right. Do you want to say anything, Matt, before we get rocking here?
I know I just want to thank everyone for hopping on and being here and just kind of we've been using some of these products with our dealership for a few years now and actually getting to have Dr. Levacy, the guy that created it, kind of gives us some tips, tricks, and just some kind of behind the curtain stuff about the products. And just thought that would kind of be kind of neat just to be able to see where it all came from and, crafted by science to work like magic. So
Yep.
take it away, Curt.
You bet. Thank you, Matt. Well, guys, like Matt said, thank you for your time today. I sure appreciate that. If you have questions, please feel free to enter those in the chat box as we go, or if you want to you can interrupt as well. That's totally fine. And we are going to record this because I know you said you had a couple guys who weren't able to be with us today. So, as Matt said, the name of our company is Alchemy Bioscience, and our tagline that my wife created because she's way smarter than me, crafted by science to work like magic. For those of you who've used our products before, you guys know that there's a kind of a nifty little like color change effect that happens when you put our stuff in the tank most of the time, and just one of the ways that we kind of wanted to make sure that you knew that there's something actually going on, something working there. So we'll give you a little bit of background about myself and about the company, and then we'll talk about some of the products as well. So I like showing this because I am a little bit of a mad scientist. As Matt said, I do have a PhD. It is not, however, in chemistry. It's not in soil science. It's not in agronomy. It's not in plant physiology. It's not in anything ag-related, in fact. My PhD is in interpersonal communication. So I always tell everybody, I am literally more qualified to give this presentation than I am to have created these products. But with that said, what I learned going through my PhD program was really how to learn. So I grew up on a farm in Southeast Iowa back in the 80s. And for those of you old enough to remember that, you'll know that was not a good time to be on a farm in the 80s. And so the reason that I went the route that I did with my education was because I didn't see a future in the farm. I mean, my dad lost, pretty much everything except for the land itself. And by the grace of God, he's worked so hard and now is built back up to row crop and cattle again and everything, and actually expanded the farm from what we had originally, which is super cool. But when you're growing up in that, in the struggle of the 80s, that was a tough time to be in agriculture. So I did go off to school. Like I said, got a degree in an unrelated field, um, studying people and how people communicate and relationships and so on. But it really was helpful and useful to learn how to translate the sort of scientific, nerdy academic ivory tower research, and then basically distill or boil that down into a way that is useful, or what I hope is useful for you, the farmer. So what I did was I took what I've learned over the years, and I took all this information and this learning process, and I started building products because we had done really well for ourselves doing some independent consulting and doing some sales. But eventually we came upon some issues that like the companies I was working with did not have solutions for. So I thought, well, if these companies don't have solutions for them, I'm just going to start building solutions myself. And I want to apologize here real quick, guys. Excuse me. I actually have influenza A right now, so you're going to get like a B minus presentation. So I am sorry for that, but we'll get through it. Okay. So the way that I build products, and this graphic is actually really important, and you'll see why here in a second. But I always pretty much start with silica. Silica is a fascinating substance, an element in that it's not considered plant essential. But that's kind of a bunch of crap because when you understand how like the essential elements, how that was defined way back in the day, what happened was they did these potted experiments, where basically they would grow a plant and they would withhold a certain nutrient, so boron, zinc, manganese, whatever. And if the plant could complete its entire life cycle in the absence of that element, they said, look, it's not plant essential. But if it died before it can complete its life cycle, they'd say, well, it had to have this. So for instance, if you withhold nitrogen from a plant for its entire life cycle, it will not be able to go all the way through vegetative reproductive phase and then mature and senesce. It can't do it. It dies. Silica is an interesting one because now it is recognized by AFCO, which is the governing body of the fertilizer manufacturing industry, that as what it's considered a plant beneficial substance. Okay, so when they were doing this research back in the 30s on what's considered essential, what they found was a plant can complete its life cycle in the absence of silica, or at least most plants can. Some cannot. But there is a massive difference in terms of both yield and quality when we have silica in the mix. So it was like just shy of hitting this plant essential threshold. And because of that, we've not spent a lot of time on it in agriculture as we probably should. So I usually start with silica because of the underutilized nature and how it's not really well known in agriculture, and therefore we are missing a lot of the benefits that silica brings to the table. I also will then start looking at things like vitamins, amino acids, and other proprietary acids. And all of these lead to the same destination, which is stress mitigation. So the reason I have this graphic is because, I try not to get too complicated. You don't want to have 83 different things in there and then you're stepping on each other's toes. But my thought is, using the metaphor of the roadway here, like if I'm trying to get somewhere and there's a crash on the silica road, or road construction on the vitamin road, then I'm hoping, the amino acid or the proprietary acids or whatever else, the synergists in there can help still get us to this point of stress mitigation. And guys, I want to take a quick pause right here and just say this. There's a lot of all the companies. In fact, I'm going to stop the share real quick because I want to make sure to emphasize this point. So all of the ag companies that I'm aware of anyway right now are doing this thing, and I understand why they're doing it, and I respect why they're doing it. But they're basically wanting to say, look, our products may not give you a yield bump, but that's because we may give you, a plant physiological change, or we may set it up for success, and so on and so forth. And that's all true. That's not necessarily just a sales pitch. But at the end of the day, the products that you guys are going to go out and as you're sorting through all the sales pitch and all the crap, and as you're trying to determine what you're going to use on your farm, you've got to have an ROI, right? Like at some point, you can't just buy products because they are setting us up for success and then it doesn't happen, right? So I want you to understand, guys, that this idea of stress mitigation, to me, is the highest probability, highest likelihood of an ROI of about anything that you can buy and put on your farm as an input this coming year. I mean, if you look at the data as far as even, broadcast P&K, starter fertilizer, micronutrients, any of them, all of them, you've got to hit that limiting factor, right? Well, what is the limiting factor? Because for some guys, maybe it is zinc. For some guys, maybe it's whatever. But we're all gonna have Mother Nature stress our plants. Like it's gonna happen year in and year out. If you get that one good year in 10, I suppose, maybe. Okay, sure. But as we go through the data and I go through the stuff here today, you're gonna see we have a very consistent ROI. So I want to make sure that we don't approach this with the mindset of like, oh, this is an add-on. To me, this is not an add-on. This should be the very first thing that we reach for because it has the most consistent ROI of about anything that you're going to be able to deal with. So I just want to throw that out there and make that point clear. Moving on. So stress mitigation, why silica? If you take nothing else from this presentation today, guys, know that silica in general and the products that we're going to talk about, and I put PiKSi Dust Plus up here because I know that's one, Matt has used the most and some of you have probably already used. They're stress mitigators. They're going to help mitigate that stress. And that's important for this reason. Okay. One of the dirty little secrets in agriculture, guys, is that there are no products on the market that actually increase your yield. We know, especially those of you guys who do seed sales, you know that the highest yield potential is the day that you crack open that bag or that box, right? From that day forward, we start to suffer yield loss. And all we can do is decrease yield loss. That's it. That's all we can do. That's why the Dowdies, the Hulas, the Alex Harrells, all these guys that are raising 600 bushel corn and 200 bushel beans and whatever, like these crazy numbers now, why are they able to do it when we're not? Because they are mitigating or stopping that yield loss. They're stopping the top end falling out of it better than other places and other people are. So you've got to think about every product that you're buying as an insurance policy, right? It's an insurance policy against a specific set of stressors. So the case in point, or the example I always use is, and this is hypothetical or theoretical, admittedly, right? But if you had a field and you had no weeds in that field at all, I'm talking none, right? Not like you can't see them, but like there are literally no weeds. And you go spray a herbicide, you go spray Liberty, you go spray Roundup, are you going to get a yield bump? No, of course you're not, because the point of the herbicide is to kill the yield robbing weed. And if there were no weeds, and you can sure say we can have the argument about dicamba and the cupping and does that it acts as a PGR, yada, yada, yada. Sure, okay? But in general, right, the point here is the herbicide is stopping the yield loss that is attributable to the weed the competition from the weeds. When you read the published literature about silica and what all silica does, it becomes very, very clear that silica helps with a bunch of biotic factors, right? Like fungal pressure, disease pressure, bacterial pressure, whatever. I will not and cannot make claims about our products helping with these things, right? Because the EPA cares about two things very, very deeply. Number one is the raw materials that you use, which is why we always only use materials that are not pesticides. There's some companies are playing fast and loose, and I don't like that, where they're putting in, PGRs or pesticides, illegal pesticides sometimes into products. And if the EPA ever catches you doing that, they can actually demand crop destruction. So just be aware, if you find that a company is doing that, be very careful. So that's number one, the raw materials you use. Number two is the claims that you make, though. And so like I said, even though the literature is clear that silica can do these amazing things for fungal, bacterial diseases, et cetera, we don't claim those things. We don't talk about those things. What we do talk about, though, is we are an insurance policy against abiotic factors. Things like too hot, too cold, so temperature extremes, too wet, too dry. Lodging is another one, right? Wind. So these are things that I can give you concrete examples, and I'm about to, of how silica can actually help mitigate the stress that is attributable to those things. So let's talk a little bit about how it works. The answer here is it depends. Now, some of you who follow me on TikTok may have seen the recent videos that I did where I'm talking about a crop-specific approach to amino acids. Well, I should probably expand that a little bit and tell you that I actually take a crop-specific approach to pretty much everything we've ever done. And this right here was kind of the starting point of this. Crops are different, guys. Plants are different, right? Corn is not soybeans, which is not potatoes, which is not hemp, which is not wheat. So it's important that we understand how the plants interact with silica and with amino acids for that matter, so that we can then maximize the potential of those substances to help with the plant. So let's talk a little bit about monocots first. So monocots and dicots. So this is, corn is a monocot, beans would be dicot. Both of them have this LSI1 gene right here. LSI1 allows silica to get into the root. So there's a great study published in 2021 showing that soybeans can actually accumulate silica in the roots, okay? Dicots do not have LSI2. LSI2 is a gene that allows silica to cross the Casparian strip, get into the phloem, and then translocate throughout the plant. Monocots do. So what this means is the implications here is monocots' primary uptake for silica, guys, is always going to be through the roots. It is the most efficient and most effective way that we can get silica into a monocot, whether that's small grains, small cereals, or corn, or whatever it is. We've got to get silica into the root zone with monocots, okay? What happens then is it gets into the roots, it gets into the phloem, and then as that plant transpires, the silica moves up through the stalk or the stem and then out through the leaves, and it concentrates around the stomata and within the stalk itself as well. So if you guys have never done this, one of the things that I really encourage guys to do is where you use PiKSi dust, which is our in-furrow product, or the PiKSi dust 2x2, which is our 2x2 product, obviously. When you put that on, if you'll go out and do a trial with and without, go out partway through the season and just take your hands, walk through the field, and just like bend the plants over. Like I've actually seen guys snap a corn plant off, like green snap, and on the untreated, and have the treated bounce right back up. Because what silica does is it gets in there. It's kind of like calcium is another really important nutrient for this. It strengthens those cell walls. It actually gets in between the cells and acts kind of like the mortar on like brick and mortar. So we can make claims about reducing lodging because we can strengthen those cell walls and the structure of that plant. We make it stronger when we get silica in there. The other thing that we're doing too is we're also silicifying or increasing the silica around the stomata of what effectively becomes the old growth of those plants. And I learned this from John Kempf. Excuse me. This is again theory at this point, but I do want to test this theory. I believe that what we're doing is we're helping change the plant physiologically because John Kempf says that when you have plants go into stress mode, right? When they get stressed out, what do they want to do? They want to shut down transpiration. They want to close the stomata in the new growth, and then they pull back. So everything then kind of like the old growth, those stomata stay open. The plant keeps transpiring because it's trying to protect itself. When we put silica in the plant early, what we're essentially doing then is we're closing the stomata on the old growth, right? And we're telling that plant, nope, keep working. You're okay. Keep working. And so as the plant transpires and takes up nutrients, it actually shoves that up to the new growth, which it wouldn't normally do in a stress condition. So I believe that's one of the things we're doing. Like I said, that's a theory that I want to test and see. But we know that, if you get that pineapple-y corn when you get real hot and dry, you will notice a visual difference above ground where you have the silica in furrow versus where you don't. And it is for this reason, because we silicify around those stomata. So that's monocots, right? So we always go in the root zone or in the 2x2 root zone for monocots. Now with dicots, it's a little bit different. There, we do a foliar spray. We've got to get on through the stomata because, as I just said, dicots don't have LSI2. So they can take it into the roots, but they can't translocate it in the plant that way. So instead we go in through the stomata. And then this is also why it's important that the timing is critical. And Matt knows this very well. We always shoot for V3 being ideal. Co-application with a post pass is great. For our PiKSi Dust Plus, big fan of doing that. But we really would, if you're like, hey man, it's R3, can we put it on now? Well, you can, but you're going to miss out on a lot of the benefits. So it's very important that we get this on early rather than late. And I would encourage you, even if you have to go on like if your choices are like V2 or R2, definitely hit the front window instead of the back window. Okay, so vegetative growth is absolutely critically important that we hit this in vegetative growth. As I mentioned, like you get the sort of pineapple-y look. And what we're going to do is whether we're talking drought stress or heat stress, this is where silica really, really shines. So this says soil compaction. I need to change the label here, but what I'm just trying to show you is like a sandier soil versus a heavier, tighter soil, right? So in a sandier soil, we got the water percolates down and moves through that soil profile relatively quickly. So when it turns off hot and dry, this ground over here on the left, this burns up first, right? That makes sense. Low CEC, light sandy ground, that's what happens. On the compacted soil over here, what it's showing is on our heavier ground, right? So in a lot of the I states, I'm over here in central Illinois, we've got 83 feet of topsoil, and we're almost praying for a drought every year because our stress is actually the opposite, where we actually have too much water most of the time. But what's fascinating about silica, guys, is I don't know how many of y'all have kids, but I have young kids, 9, and my daughter's about to be 5, and they like to, yeah, Matt's got it, is right there. My kids like to bumper bowl, right? You know, they go to the bowling alley and you put the little guardrails up so that it doesn't like fall into the gutters. Silica acts kind of the same way. I cannot fully explain to you how that it can help in cold, wet soils and how it can help in hot, dry soils, but it does. What it does is it tends to balance things out. And in fact, I've had people say, well, if we put this on, will we see an increase in potassium in the tissue samples? And I always say it depends. I can't look you in the eye and tell you it's going to, but what I can tell you is that what we've seen over the years is you're going to have better balance. So where you may have calcium numbers way off the charts and potassium, magnesium numbers are low, where you use any of our products, that tends to actually be more balanced out. So how it does that, I truthfully do not know, but this is sort of the magic part of the silica. Heat stress is another thing, same thing, right? So I love this picture because this is a study published in 2020. This is on, I think it was on tomatoes, so this would be dicot, so it'd be foliar. And we've got a normal condition on over here on the left. So you've got with and without silica under normal, no heat stress. On the right, we've got heat stress with and without silica. So this is like a top view, and then this is a front view, right? So you can see the wiltiness over here without silica, and the heat stress is getting pretty bad. But this is the big one. This is the one I really like showing everybody because look at the root difference. Even in the healthy conditions, look at how we're driving root mass, right? I think it was 2021 when it was really, really like, oh my goodness, we were going to have this terrible drought across the Midwest. And then we ended up having like bumper crops, right? Because when we have dry conditions early, we drive root growth. And then when we get water late, we're set up to take advantage of that. What you really don't want is you don't want wet early because then it makes your roots lazy and they're not going to go anywhere. And then turn off hot and dry late because then you're in trouble. So one of the things I always encourage growers to do is anywhere you apply any of our products, I don't care if we're talking the in-furrow on corn, I don't care if we're talking the foliar on soybeans, guys, go dig roots because you will notice a difference. Even if you don't see a visual difference above ground, you will see a visual difference below ground in the root mass. And we are setting you up for success there. And like I said earlier, that's not just a sales pitch. This is partly how we're going to get how I believe that we're going to get the yield back on it, which we very, very consistently do. I don't know if any of you are dealing with salt stress, so I'm going to be brief on this, but I do want to talk about it real quick because the research shows that silica absolutely helps with salt stress. And this is where or the reason why I.
What's that? Is that?
What's that? Is there a question about salt stress? No? Okay. So this is Westland Family Farms, and I met Scott. He's a really good friend of mine. I met him on an airplane on the way back from the Commodity Classic down in San Antonio back in like, I don't remember what year it was, 2013 maybe. And Scott said, when we started talking, he said they farm between like 4,000 and 6,000 acres. And I was like, is land rent that crazy or like what's going on? I did not know that, and some of you may know this already, North Dakota is literally a frozen swamp. So like if you look up here in the top area back here, this is a slough. And Scott said, look, in a dry year, we'll plant right through those sloughs in the spring. And in a wet year, we just can't. So like it literally varies their farm that much. It's a frozen swamp. But Scott said one of the problems we have is we have a lot of salinity issues. And so this is a picture taken up there where they farm. And as you can tell, yes, that is literally salt. And it is very hard to get anything to grow in those conditions. So Scott was like, hey, do you have anything that we could deal with or we could mess with on this? And so that was when I literally started creating the PiKSi Dust products. I was like, I didn't know anything that was going to help with salt stress that looked like this. So we started playing with silica, and sure enough, it worked. So that was where we came up with the PiKSi Dust product. And guys, all these claims are boring and they're going to look the same because again, that's what we can say that is safe. Enhances plant tolerance to abiotic stresses, as we talked about, temperature extremes, excessive salt levels, heavy metal toxicity. But we do improve water use efficiency. We help with drought stress. And this is very economical, by the way. So one of the things that's going to make you crazy, I like getting the bad news out of the way first. One of the things that drives everybody nuts is these products always start out concentration based because I don't have a patent on these products. It's trade secret like Coca-Cola. And what I have done is I've literally read peer-reviewed university data, and then I've figured out how to put a few of those things together and come up with products that are commercially viable. But in doing that, all of the university research, guys, is always concentration based. So, parts per million or in grams per gallon. So what that means is the more gallons you use, the more expensive it becomes. So if you're running 3 gallons an acre in furrow, it comes out to basically $1 per gallon per acre. So it's $3 at 3 gallons, $4 at 4 gallons, $5 at 5, so on and so forth. Now, the goal is always to get to where I can get you just a straight per acre rate. And we finally got there on the PiKSi Dust Plus this year. I'll talk about that in a little bit. But just know that the reason that it is this way is because that's what I can support scientifically to minimize our liability. Because I have tons of university data saying, hey, this stuff works at these rates. Also, this is not for use as a foliar application. So again, there are some things the EPA says this substance is fine as long as it's applied to the soil, but can't be if you put it on as a foliar, then it would cross over into pesticide land for one dumb reason or another. And so again, it just depends upon like which inert ingredients we're using, which synergists we're using, etc. So as I've told you before, go dig roots, whether we're talking in-furrow or foliar. The interesting thing about this, guys, is we typically like this 2020 trial in North Dakota that Josh Messer sent me. This is a pretty pronounced difference from a visual above ground. We don't typically see this. This is not a product that you're going to drive down 60 miles an hour down the road and be like, oh man, I want to show the neighbors that. Like it's crazy because typically we're used to seeing stuff all over Twitter or X or whatever where it's like, oh, here's my starter with and without. And then they're like, okay, well, show me the yield at the end of the year. And maybe there was a visual difference early on, but it didn't yield any difference. Guys, this is the exact opposite. I'm telling you, you may not see jack crap until the yield monitor, and then it may be 8, 10, 15 bushels. That's really consistently what we see. But again, what you do notice is a difference when you go dig roots. And so that's why I encourage you to go look at that. So we started out in North Dakota. We did rapidly move over to Riley Brothers Farms over in Wisconsin. They picked up 9 bushels with it their first year in 2016, and they use it on every acre since. I love Josh. Those guys, they literally said, hey, the next time you have any, I guess I'm recording it, so I can say this. He said, the next time you have a batshit crazy idea, test it on our farm. And that just carte blanche. They're like, if I have an idea, they're always willing to test it. And I appreciate that we've got that kind of a rapport with our growers. So 10-year average yield across over 4 states is approximately 7.6 bushels an acre. Again, this is in furrow, guys. It can mix right in with your starter fertilizer. The only thing it does not mix with is calcium. So if you have crazy hard water, all we have to do is treat that first with AMS to make sure that the calcium is tied up to get rid of those cations, and we're good to go. Otherwise, 318, 18, 6, 24, 6, 10, 34, and it doesn't matter. We can mix with all of those. We also recently created, I've been working on this for like 2 or 3 years. I think it was 3 years was when we started this 3 years ago. I came up with a PiKSi Dust 2x2. So the other thing that you typically can't mix PiKSi Dust with because of the potassium content is nitrate. You can get potassium nitrate that's, you can get to the point where that's insoluble. But working with our chemist, we were able to get a soluble version of this to where now we do have a version that is planter sideband available as well. So this is where if a guy has in furrow, but he wants to run calcium in furrow, can't mix it with calcium, but we could kick the PiKSi Dust out to the 2x2. Or maybe he doesn't have in furrow at all, but he says, hey, I still want to put it in the root zone for my grasses or for my corn, for my wheat, whatever. Then we can do that as well. So again, compatible with UAN, compatible with 1034, so on and so forth. And in most cases, we can actually put this directly into UAN even without a pre-slurry. We make the exact same claims that we would for in furrow, improving water use efficiency, help alleviating drought stress, etc. I do want to point this out, guys. Do not Y drop this. This is very important. This is to go on at planting only, okay? It's very critically important that we get this on early in this plant's life. What will happen is if you put this on later, you try and Y drop it, you can theoretically shut down that plant's transpiration when it's like in a rapid uptake growth stage. So we did a couple of small trials just to confirm that, and it does work. I can cut your yield in a big way if you put this on at the wrong time. So as long as you're on with the planter, with the PiKSi Dust products, you're totally fine. It's also a little more economical because again, this one, we've got a different synergist in there. And so you're talking about roughly 35 cents per gallon per acre. So most guys, I assume, will be in that 10 to 20. So there's your price breakdown on that. I love that the guys that we've been working with on this actually broke these down by hybrids for us, which I really appreciate. So this last year in North Dakota, you guys may know more about these varieties than I do. I'm not great at seed sales, but here's some the varieties that we've got. Here's the data summary. So we're averaging over 11 bushels with this for, again, what is that? $3.50 to $10 an acre, depending upon your rate that you're running. So excellent ROI on this as well, guys.
Hey, Curt.
Yes, sir.
Hey, I joined late, so I'm not sure if we were just supposed to jump in and ask questions here.
Yeah, go for it. You're good.
if we do water in furrow, and then just dribble it 2x2 over the top without knowing the calcium levels, or not wanting to treat it with AMS, would you recommend then dribbling it over the top with UAN?
I would, because here's the
Okay.
thing, guys. So silica, here's what's interesting. It is still a plant nutrient, right? And the only form that is plant available of silica is monosilicic or orthosilicic acid. And it's an anion. So in other words, it's mobile in the soil. So yes, I absolutely would have no problem with you putting it on top. If that's how you're going to dribble on the 2x2 or 2x0 or whatever it is, I'm totally fine with that. Good question. Other questions before we move on? All right. So moving into the pixie dust foliar. So again, this is where we're switching from, corn and wheat monocots to dicots. So this would be soybeans, this would be potatoes, this would be sunflowers, hemp, cannabis, etc. Again, similar claims, guys. Again, temperature extremes, excessive salt levels, better foliar nutrition for better yield. Like I said, these are all just stock claims that we can make based on what the EPA and AFCO approve. Okay. Um, what we will see, or one thing I will say is, I told you I'm pretty risk averse. So like we actually went to the trouble and spent the money. We got labeled for co-application with Enlist One, Enlist Duo, Ingenia, and Extendamax. So if you guys are using any of the major dicambas, you're pretty much covered. If you're using, Liberty, Roundup, we're good with all of those. I didn't want anybody to have an issue and then say, oh, well, you used something in there that wasn't approved. Like we actually went to the trouble of getting labeled, so you're safe with that. Excellent ROI on dicots such as soybeans and potatoes, not for use in furrow, again, for reasons we've talked about. And then this is new for 2025, and I'm really excited to announce this. That we have a standard use rate of 18 grams per acre, regardless of your spray rate. Remember, I told you before that everything was in like grams per gallon, right? And that's true, but we finally got enough data on this that I feel good about this. So what happened was Ryan Robinson over in Indiana, who I'm grateful, very, very grateful for, ran trials at 3, 4, and 6 gallons an acre, and the yield went like this. Where Beck's PF are proven at 10. Josh Messer did 5, 10, and 15. So when you compile all of this data and you aggregate this data, what we see is we can actually get diminishing returns when we go from 10 to 15 gallons an acre in terms of the amount of product that we're applying. So we know that 10 is optimum. So now instead of saying, hey, we're going to go with 1.8 grams per gallon, now it's no, we're going to go with that 10 gallon rate, which is 1.8 grams per gallon times 10, which is 18 grams an acre, regardless of your spray rate. So if you're running Liberty at 15 or 20 or whatever you're running for your herbicide there at V3, don't care. It's 18 grams per acre. It also makes it easier for now for math because one jug of this, I'm sorry, I've got it sitting over here on my shelf. One jug does 100 acres. So the math is really, really easy on this, guys. And the MSRP on that is just a flat $9 an acre now. So we made that less expensive for those of you who maybe have used it in the past and ran Liberty with it. So we're really excited about that. Now, where I told you that we typically don't see anything visually on the monocots like corn, that's true. When we get into beans, it's a little bit different. A lot of times we'll see something like this. So this again was pictures from Ryan Robinson's farm in 2023, where this is about 2 weeks apart, and you can see the treated on both sides and the untreated strip down the middle. And that is a pretty common thing. You'll notice some visual differences with the pixie dust. Node counts, I encourage you to go do node counts. One of the things that's fascinating to me, guys, is there's a lot of companies right now trying to come out with PGRs that will increase lateral branching. Everybody wants to increase lateral branching. First of all, we can do that a little bit by, lowering the planting population, right? That's step one. But number two, there's a problem when you just increase lateral branching because one of two things can potentially happen. In a really good year, let's say you get completely ideal conditions. Have you ever seen it where those pods get loaded up? Like really, you put on a lot of beans and the potential's there, and then you actually break them off right here at the main, right, like where it comes into the main stem. They just actually bust and break. See, the problem is, guys, remember I told you silica strengthens cell walls and acts as like the mortar for brick and mortar? When you don't have silica there and you put all that extra weight on, you can actually break those off. But when we increase the branching with a support system of silica in there, now all of a sudden we're setting that plant up for success to be able to actually support what we've built on there. On the flip side, I told you there's two ways this can go problematic. On the other side, let's say it turns off hot and dry. Now all of a sudden your plant's just like, well, crap, I spent all this energy investing into all these lateral branches, and then it just pulls them back. It aborts the pods, it aborts the nodes, and then you're only stuck with what's left on the main stem anyway. Well, guess what? We tend to see better main stem retention as well. So this is Josh Riley's farm back when they started with us, 68 on the check and 75 with the treated. And you'll notice here, again, just look at the main stems. We had the main stem loaded up. So when you are mitigating stress, like I told you guys, I think this is to me is the lowest hanging fruit that we can get in agriculture in terms of an ROI, especially in crap commodity price years. We want to go for the things that have a high rate of return for you, the grower. So when you look at Pixie Dust Plus over the years, Mason Wells down in Illinois, they've tested it for multiple years and they're averaging 6 bushels an acre. They've done trials. Here's a Matt Adrian up in Minnesota had a 0, but notice the timing on this was R3. Matt Rash got a 4.5 at R2, but we've talked about that. And I'm like, guys, we really got it. That timing is really critical. So I put these in here to show you, we know when it works, guys. We know when it doesn't work. And I'm going to tell you, your consistency goes way down if you get into the reproductive phases, to the point where I would say just put it back on the shelf and use it next year, because you will have a much more consistent response if you'll put it on when you're supposed to, which is that, V2 to V5. I will also say this, guys, we built this product out of our garage when we were living in Washington State. My wife and I would put the kids to bed and we'd go work from 8 to midnight every night. And I'm very proud of the fact that we started a little garage company and got to Beck's PFR proven. I know not everybody's sold on Beck's, and that's fine. But here's the deal. I'm never afraid of submitting for independent third-party data, ever, 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 ever. And in fact, it frustrates me when companies are like, we're not going to do that. Why not? Like, what are you afraid of? Oh, because the way they do research. Well, then talk to them and have them do research the right way if you think they're doing it wrong. So I'm never, ever afraid of independent third-party data, because when you have a product that is rooted in science and basically you started with that foundation and you built up from there, it should work. And that's why, like I said, I don't mean to sound arrogant about it. I'm just very confident based on what we've seen over the years. So 5-year average increase across 4 states is just shy of 6 bushels an acre. So, Beck's PFR proven, I think, had us at 2.5 or something like that. And the reason I'm so proud and so confident in this, guys, is because that's what I would call like a bad year. Like on a bad year, this is going to break even for you. On a good year, you're going to get 5 or 6x return. So that's where, again, from the standpoint of somebody who grew up in a poverty world of farming back in the 80s, like this is good for the farmer, and I feel good about that. I don't know if any of you guys are doing potatoes, so I'm going to breeze through this real quickly, but the best ROI of anything we've ever actually seen is on potatoes, even better than soybeans. I've been working with Lamb Weston for a number of years out in the Pacific Northwest, and the response on potatoes is just absolutely absurd. So we're averaging almost a 1 ton an acre increase over 4,000 acres over the last 3 calendar years. I'm going to touch on this real briefly because I'm guessing none of you are growing cotton, which is totally fine, but this is kind of the debut or the intro into the other line of products that we're starting to build. Cotton candy is available commercially this year. So is the product called Crimson, which is for tree fruits. But what I figured out, guys, as I told you early on, there's a lot of companies right now that are taking a shotgun approach to amino acids. And I'm not knocking any particular companies. I'm just telling you the facts of the matter here. What happens is they buy a cheap byproduct, usually from the feed industry, and they say, hey, wait, we can go take these amino acids and we can put them on your crops and we can get a response. And that's true. Like, I'm not knocking that, they're probably getting some response with that. But what I have found is that when you take a crop-specific approach to amino acids, you can increase the consistency of the response. And you also, my first principle of building products, guys, is do no harm. Okay, so I don't even know how to pronounce this. I don't know if it's cysteine or cystine, but I know that if you put that amino acid on wheat, you actually increase the susceptibility of fusarium head blight. That's published data, right? Like you can cut lettuce yield.
Yeah.
What's that? Oh, you can cut lettuce yield by 80 to 90%, fresh weight lettuce yield, by putting the wrong amino acid on at the wrong time. You can cut corn yield by putting the wrong amino acid on at the wrong time. And guys, this is not me. This is published university data showing that when we take a shotgun approach to amino acids, in a best case scenario, we get inconsistent results. And in a worst case scenario, we can go backwards. So we are starting to build crop specific amino acids. And the thing I love about this picture is this is down by Lubbock, Texas last year. With starter pictures, like I said, everybody loves putting those up on Twitter where it's like, oh, hey, here's our starter. Look how great it is. And the guys are like, what did it yield? And nobody wants to talk about that at the end. Well, what you are seeing here visually is the yield. This is less cotton in the front. This is more cotton in back. We increased cotton yield by 25%. It was like $140 an acre return for that grower. So I'm very pleased and very proud of that. I also want to talk real quick, guys, about seed treatment, because again, fundamentally, I didn't build these products this is not a system that it's like, hey, you have to use my seed treatment, my micros, my foliars, whatever. This is designed, guys, to meet you where you're at, to give you an opportunity to get a silica source on your crop. So I understand not all of you have in furrow, not all of you have 2x2, not all of you are making a foliar pass. If you don't hit any of those, or if none of those boxes hit you, we do have a seed treatment as well. We've seen very good and consistent results with this as well, and it's very, very, very affordable. We're talking like sub $3 an acre, regardless of which crop we're talking about. Okay, so we've got versions for corn, soybeans, and small grains. And again, the big thing here is we're going to see bigger root mass, and it's not just about silica. We've got other stuff in there as well, vitamins, amino acids, and so forth. But again, the root mass is going to be the biggest visual you're going to see. Small grains is kind of fun because we do typically see much thicker stem diameter, maybe even shortening the internode, the length of the first internode as well. And again, great results, especially for the cost that we've got on there. Excellent ROI. And I'm also working on a planter box treatment, but that one will be very kind of few and far between for this next year. But like I said, the corn and soybean version, guys, and wheat version of the amino acid products are going to be available only for the guys that we're currently working with or for current customers. So if you guys are currently buying PiKSi Dust Plus through Matt, I'm happy to put you on a list to get you to try that stuff. It is trial only. So like I said, I'm not charging for that. I am asking for data in response or in exchange for that because I don't release anything until we've tested it sort of ad nauseum. So Matt, I'm going to turn it over to you because I saw you posted a comment there. Do you want to share that real quick? Or I can read the comment too.
There we go.
Okay. There you go.
Sorry, I got my youngest here, so he's been.
Oh, we might have lost Matt. Okay, well, I don't know if you guys can see this or not, but in the comments down below, he said our in-house yield for PiKSi Dust Plus in 2023 was 2.93. 5-year data is 5.62. Our 2024 was hard to find great data locally due to rain, but I had a customer in Southeast Minnesota get 3.8 on 500 acres with 3 check strips. So, like I said, guys, I'm not very good at sales. I'm a good scientist and a bad salesman. I'm very passionate about what we do. I thank you guys for your time today. I'm happy to answer whatever questions you guys may have. And like I said, mostly I just want to say thanks for your time and for being here with us and putting up with my sick self today. Does anybody have any questions?
Curt, I've got a question on potatoes.
Yeah.
So we had a grower, he wasn't able to make it this morning, but his question was he grows a lot of potatoes on peat ground, high organic matter, bad drainage. But his question was, how would PiKSi Dust respond in those situations versus kind of the conventional ground we have in Iowa?
Sure. That's a good question. So one of the things that we have seen, I'm extrapolating here because I have not spent a lot of time in potato fields. Okay, even though I work in the Pacific Northwest a lot, but I don't get out there a lot during growing season. I would guess that those fields are more likely to be susceptible to disease in terms of when those stems or the stalks lay down. And so again, I will never make a disease claim, but one of the things that the guys in the Pacific Northwest will tell you is that because of the strengthening of the cell walls, they can get those potato stems to stand longer, like to the 4th of July or later. And so they're laying in the dirt less, right? So there's less soil to stem contact, and therefore those plants stay healthier longer. So I would be surprised if we don't see something like that where you have a generally healthier plant based upon the fact that we're keeping it more upright and more erect. Because I think heavier soil, I think a lot more water, a lot more moisture, I think, bacterial disease, fungal issues.
Thank you.
Yep. Oh, there, Matt's back. We just solved all the world's problems without you, Matt. Sorry.
Yeah, I just gave the best 30-second lecture ever, and everyone missed it.
Well, try again.
No, basically what I put it this, like, I went and grabbed our book, and in 23 we had about a 3 bushel, and our combined over the last 5 years is over 5 bushels with PiKSi Dust Plus. And we've tested on different timings. Like when it first came out, we got a little bit later, but as we've, that timing is crucial to it. We've seen better consistent results, quote unquote, the earlier we can get it on. I mean, Mother Nature is not always the nicest to us, which we found out this last year. Why it's like a lot of our data we found this year was just, it was so skewed because we were so wet, and some of it too, the timing wasn't correct or as timely, I guess, as we would like. But I did have a grower in Southeast Minnesota that or 2 growers actually with 3 check strips. So the product works. I'm excited actually, trial some of these other products. We'll have a seed treatment on some beans, potentially on some corn. Some of the 2x2, I know a couple of you on here have reached out about that. So there's a lot of excitement about, the stress mitigation, the calciums. I mean, there's just a lot of stuff going on. Amino acids is a big one. I mean, that's what honestly, I think farmers will hear more about this in the next 2-3 years. And that's why we're kind of I don't want to say ahead of it here, but we've been using it for 2 years now on some other products, and it's already in, PiKSi Dust Plus. I mean, so we've already been using it without technically really knowing, because there's a lot of magic in that stuff. I mean, there is. I wish we could get that, secret ingredient in there, but there's a lot of stuff he's talking about, but there's that one thing that he's not telling us that I think.
I will tell you guys this. For one thing, it's not on the label because it doesn't hit the guaranteed thresholds. But if you look at like the Washington State Department of Ag, so there is cobalt, molybdenum, and nickel in there as well. Like I said, not enough to hit a guaranteed analysis, but there is cobalt, moly, and nickel in PiKSi Dust Plus as well.
Interesting. Well, there you have it. But that's all I kind of wanted to say is just that it's been proven here. I mean, we've been selling a bunch of it for years, and very good track record, and really excited now to be working with Curt to get the product direct. I'm real excited about that. And honestly, just the other day was the first time I'd really heard, the mixing, 1 container, 100. I mean, I've had more guys, if there was a downfall to it, was that.
Yep.
And now that's been fixed. So I think it's full steam ahead. That's all I got.
Well, thank you, Matt. And thank you for putting the call together today, or the webinar together. Anybody else have any questions for me? All right. Well, if you guys have questions, please feel free to reach out to Matt. He can get you product. Or if you've got other technical questions later on, he can get you my contact info. And I'm happy to answer any of those that I can. And we'll look forward to working with you guys this year and beyond.
Perfect. Thanks a lot, Curt. Thanks a lot, everyone, for hopping on. And like I said, if you got any questions, feel free to reach out.
Thank you, guys.